Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard, and thank you for watching today's Canada Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, we're finally doing some work to erode the precipitation deficit across the Canadian prairies here, and we're going to continue to do that over the next week. We're in a bit of a transition phase here with the jet stream across North America, but it continues to be a favorable transition for the Canadian prairie regions here, and we'll kind of dive into that here through this video. We got some rain falling across the Canadian prairies right now, across parts of Alberta, and then also across parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Again, as we wake up on Friday morning, we're going to continue to see this area of low pressure spin down across Saskatchewan and Manitoba, kind of keeping precipitation in the area here over the next 24 to 48 hours before we bring another trough into the region by the time we get to the end of next week. And that's going to just keep the precipitation chances here at least scattered in nature. We'll keep rainfall in the forecast across the Canadian prairies. Here's the 5-day forecast from the National Blended Model. And again, it's a blend here. We get some smoothing in there, so it's not going to be, 100% how this ends up being shown here. But this takes us through Tuesday, June 25th at 7 p.m., continuing to see some additional precipitation falling across Canadian prairies. And then check out what happens when we have the next 5 days that follow there. So taking it through June 29th now, continuing to see some significant precipitation potential stacking up across Saskatchewan and Alberta, and then even parts of southern Manitoba as well, picking up on that. So here's the GFS ensemble model, which is part of the National Blended Model, but it kind of shows the story over the next 2 weeks here as we break this in half. Here's the week 1 precipitation anomaly showing the this corridor here from the Canadian prairies into the northern plains, and then as we move into week 2, so this takes us through the last couple days of June into the beginning of July. And while we get rid of the heavy precipitation across the central plains into the Midwest of the United States, we keep the precipitation chances going here across the Canadian prairies. And so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at how the pattern evolves here after we talk about temperatures for a moment. We've got this big trough over the western U.S., the Pacific Northwest, and western Canada. That's what's kept things a bit cooler and rainy across the Canadian prairies here, and then we'll continue to do so over the next 5 days through June 25th. And then as we head through the 5 days that follow that, taking us into the last several days of June, we shift this trough a little bit further off to the west. We're going to build it's really a new trough, kind of a reinforcement of the trough that's already in progress here, but building some ridging into the United States here. Going to finally feel like summer across the Corn Belt, where it's been a bit cool, feeling a little bit more like April, a very muggy April at the very least across the Midwestern United States, but building some heat into the region, and parts of Manitoba and Saskatchewan are going to start to feel that as well as we get into the last few days of June. So here's a look at the pattern, looking at a very broad look at the GFS ensemble model, focusing in on North America here. We've got this trough over the Northwest, another trough over the eastern United States, but check out what happens as we play this out just over the next 2 weeks here. Start to build some ridging into the U.S., but we keep this trough over the Northwest here, and that's what's going to keep us active across the Canadian prairies here, keeping the rain chances in the forecast. We'll take a closer look now, looking at the European long-range model, the ensemble forecast here. We'll play this out through about the very first couple of days of June, or first couple of days of July, and we'll watch this trough that's been sitting over the northwestern United States, over western Canada, begins to kind of retrograde off to the west a little bit, and that's what allows the ridge to build in over the United States, allows some of that ridging to push into parts of the eastern Canadian prairies here as well. But with this trough continuing to point into the Canadian prairies here, that's what's going to keep precipitation chances here. On the leading edge of that trough is where we see the greatest lift in the atmosphere, the greatest chance for rain and thunderstorm activity. So as we transition across North America here, continues again to be a favorable transition for the Canadian prairies. We'll take a look now at the jet stream winds here, the upper level support, where we see the stronger winds within the jet stream. That's where we see the best support for organized rain and thunderstorms. And as we just kind of play this out, we'll see this first trough spin down over Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but then we bring in another trough now over the northwestern United States. I'll go ahead and pause here when we get to the end of this loop. Now again, it's on the leading edge and in advance of the strongest jet stream upper level winds that we see the best support for organized rain and thunderstorms, and that continues to point right toward the Canadian prairie region. And again, that is why this continues to be a favorable transition for the region, and why I think we'll continue to at least slowly erode the precipitation deficit across the region. We'll look now at the European model forecast here for surface pressure and precipitation, and that'll kind of let us play the pattern out over the next week. We'll go ahead and start here today on Friday. We're watching this area of low pressure again continue to spin down across the northern plains into Saskatchewan and Manitoba over the course of the weekend here. We're now on Saturday morning. We've got the center of low pressure over southern Saskatchewan, rain surrounding that and wrapping around that area of low pressure. By the time we get to Sunday morning and Sunday afternoon, this area of low pressure is over central Manitoba right now, continuing to kind of decay and wind down by the time we get into Monday afternoon. It's lifting out of the region, but with the jet stream support, we're going to keep at least scattered showers and storms in the forecast here early next week before this next area of low pressure moves ashore off to the west. So we get now into Thursday, and then eventually on Friday now we're seeing a more organized area of low pressure developing across somewhere here from southern Manitoba or southern Alberta, southern Saskatchewan into Montana, and then eventually across the northern plains of the United States. But so we'll deal with a little bit more widespread rain here as we go through the weekend, with this area of low pressure continuing to spin down. As we get through the first few days next week, at least isolated scattered showers and storms possible before we get to the end of next week, when we'll start to look for more widespread, more organized rain and thunderstorm activity, again similar to what we've seen over the last couple of days. Now we're getting close to, or starting to knock on the doorstep of severe weather season across the Canadian prairies. We can check in with the available atmospheric instability here, and that continues to be highest across parts of the Midwest into the central United States. But as we start to get to this next storm system, does start to pull that instability a little bit further to the north. We can go ahead and we'll pause this here as we get to the end of the loop. Now let's see if I've got Friday. There we go. Let's go to right here as we get to Friday now. This is when that next area of low pressure is starting to emerge now across parts of the northern plains into the southern Canadian prairies. Starting to see some more favorable instability values here with this next storm system. So perhaps the greatest severe weather risk continuing to remain south of the United States border here through the next week. But with each one of these storm systems, we're starting to pull that favorable air mass a little bit further north. So perhaps as we get into the beginning of July, starting to see a little bit more in the way of severe weather across the Canadian prairies. So we'll look at the accumulated precipitation forecast across the entire North American continent here, or at least the United States and Canada. I'm searching for my geographic regions here early on Friday morning, but watching the precipitation accumulate here from this storm system over the next few days, keeping showers and storms at least in isolated nature in the forecast as we head through the early to middle part of next week before here we get to the end of the loop, starting to accumulate some more precipitation with that storm system here as we get to Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of next week. Let's zoom in. Let's take a look at Alberta here and just watch the precipitation accumulate here over the next week. We start with this storm system here Friday and Saturday, starting to taper off by the time we get to Sunday, but early next week, I think we'll keep at least scattered showers and storms in the forecast. Going to be, again, isolated, scattered in nature. Not everyone's going to see that before we get to Thursday and Friday of next week, and we start to accumulate a little bit more precipitation across the area with that next storm system moving into the area. Your high temperatures for the next 5 days across Alberta in the teens to near 20 degrees for Friday. This would be, this is now Saturday, looking at the high temperatures here, getting close to 20 degrees. We get to Sunday. Monday, keeping things very steady. Temperatures not on much of a roller coaster right now. Day by day, not much change here. And then we get to our high temperatures on Tuesday again, the upper teens to the lower 20s. We'll pivot off to the east, looking at Saskatchewan and Manitoba, just playing this out. Again, we'll see the more significant precipitation here as we go through the day Friday and Saturday, with this area of low pressure continuing to wind down. See a little bit of a lull in the more widespread precipitation during the early part of next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, before we get to the end of the loop here. This will be Thursday and Friday of next week, seeing the next storm system begin to push into the area. Your high temperatures here now for Saskatchewan and Manitoba the next 5 days. Cooler off to the south, where we've got rain and thunderstorms in the area. That's where we're closer to 10 degrees for the high temperature in southern Saskatchewan, but getting closer to 20 to the upper 20s as you head off to the north. Looking at the high temperatures now for Saturday. Again, rain and thunderstorms in the area, at least rain and cloud cover, keeping things a bit cooler. And then as this storm system begins to lift off to the north, we begin to introduce warmer temperatures into the region, touching the lower 20s on Monday, and then the lower to middle 20s by the time we get to Tuesday. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday morning ag forecast video, and I'll have your next Canadian regional forecast for you midday on Tuesday. Have a wonderful day and have a great weekend.